The much-awaited decision from Judge McAfee in the Fulton County fiasco case has come out. And I will tell you something. There's a lot of commentary on this particular order and opinion. I will tell you, I think it is wrong, and I'm going to give you just one example. The judge basically said either Fani Willis goes or Wade goes, the chief deputy, and if Wade goes, she can stay in the case. But he wrote this, and this is, I can't reconcile his decision when he writes words like this. An odor of mendacity remains in this case. That means an odor of lying remains in this case. And if you want the impartial submission of justice, especially I think when you're dealing with an ex-president, but with anybody, and the efficient and lawful and due process of equal protection process of a criminal justice system, the thing to do here was not to be, quote, the wisdom of Solomon and cut the baby in half, and in this case, neither half wins, but rather to make a concluding fact is, hey, there's an odor of mendacity, the judge's words, in this case, and therefore, one of them has to go, but not both. That makes absolutely no sense, zero.
This is a disappointing opinion, very disappointing opinion, because the judge, first of all, says, quotes Georgia law, and then finds that there's an appearance of impropriety that applies to criminal prosecutions that could disqualify a prosecutor. And yet he says the court found an appearance of impropriety to exist in this case. The perceived conflict in the reasonable eyes of the public threatens confidence in the legal system. I'm reading from the judge's opinion. When this danger goes uncorrected, it undermines the legitimacy and moral force of our already weakest branch of government. Well, having found that, why in the world did you give Fani Willis the opportunity to stay on in the case? Why didn't you just say her office and her are disqualified from the case? Another prosecutor has to come in. Instead, you say that with the appearance of impropriety, the odor of mendacity, lying, as Jay mentioned, nonetheless, I'm not going to do anything. I'll tell you why. It's very simply this. It is a Republican judge running for re-election in a Democratic county. There's no other way around it, Jay.
There were what they call the appearance of impropriety, which is the standard upon which you say the case can't move forward. Lawyers can't operate that way. There is a possibility of appeals. We'll get into that. Not likely, in my view, that that's going to be successful, to be quite honest. There's a Georgia Senate investigation going on. The governor's looking at it. So there's more to unfold here. But this was, I think, a very weak decision, in my view, on how this matter goes. And this just goes to show you the nature of this. But, you know, the ACLJ were involved in all of these different kind of fights. The SADA, that's Wade, can withdraw, allowing the DA, the defendants, and the public to move forward without his presence or remuneration, distracting from and potentially compromising the merits of this case. Which is interesting, Judge McAfee, because you also say that an odor of mendacity remains in the case, even if they're both, one of them's gone. So either it does or it doesn't. And that's the problem with the court's order. This wasn't the wisdom of Solomon. This is a sloppy order by a judge in a superior court in Fulton County who I think is under tremendous political pressure. But I think it's a ridiculous decision.
My sense is that Judge McAfee failed to answer, at least properly, the questions posed by this particular case brought by the defendants. So among the questions that Judge McAfee asked and answered, and questions that were indeed posed by the defendants, was whether there was an actual conflict of interest as opposed to the appearance of a conflict of interest. He asked that question and focused on that question, even though the appearance of a conflict is sufficient under Georgia law to disqualify the DA. Second, Judge McAfee asked, did the defendants meet their burden of proving an actual conflict of interest in this case, even though that is not a necessary question? Judge McAfee says no, despite unmistakable evidence showing a financial entanglement between the two principals, that is, Mr. Wade and Fani Willis. Third, the judge asked, was there evidence of forensic misconduct? That is, did Fani Willis issue prejudicial statements? The evidence, I think, is clear on that question. Yes, she did issue prejudicial statements, compounded, of course, by evidence of mendacity. Fourth, does the established record highlight a significant appearance of impropriety that infects the current structure of the prosecution team? The judge says, yes, there's sufficient evidence. However, we will not disqualify. Instead, we will give the option to the DA. My own view is Judge McAfee issued a very weak opinion, one that does not rely on either the law or precedent in Georgia.
This case will not go to trial before November. Just to mention, this is an interlocutory ruling. That is to say, it is a ruling during the pendency of a case. It is not immediately appealable as a matter of right. However, the judge could let either side, since both sides lost and both sides won, in a sense, take the case to the Georgia Court of Appeals, which the Georgia Court of Appeals could grant the interlocutory review or not. The chances are the Georgia Court of Appeals will not.
The judge says there are other forums or sources of authority, such as the General Assembly, the Georgia State Ethics Commission, the State Bar of Georgia, the Fulton County Board of Commissioners, or the voters of Fulton County may offer feedback on any unanswered questions that linger. The question that lingers is there's a taint over this proceeding, Harry, and I don't know how you remove the taint.
One of the questions that the judge focused on was whether there is a conflict of interest. What is a conflict of interest? It includes acquiring a personal interest or financial stake in the defendant's conviction. And there is indeed evidence in the record showing that Fani Willis had a personal stake in the defendant's conviction, and that is compounded by evidence of mendacity. So the appropriate remedy under the circumstances is to disqualify Fani Willis. I think the judge lacked sufficient courage to disqualify her, and I think whatever the outcome of the case against Donald Trump and the defendants may be, whatever that outcome, I think many individuals will lose confidence in the judgment of Georgia law and the prosecutor's office.
The appearance standard recognizes that even when no actual conflict exists, a perceived conflict in the reasonable eyes of the public threatens confidence in the legal system itself. When this danger goes uncorrected, it undermines the legitimacy and moral force of our already weakest branch of government. If that is the case, why did you not disqualify the DA's office?
That's exactly right. If that is the case, Judge, you said that, why did you not find that the district attorney's office, Fani Willis, and all her assistants in the office are disqualified? You say the district attorney's prosecution is encumbered by an appearance of impropriety. You say that this affects the public perception of the criminal justice system. You say that there is an odor of lying in the case. Why in the world have you allowed the district attorney now to make the decision whether she stays in the case or her boyfriend leaves? Why have you done that? Why don't you take the courage and say, with all these things combined, you cannot stay in this case and give the public a sense of integrity in the criminal justice system? That's all I want, integrity in the criminal justice system, because you can't pull the trigger. Very sad.
It makes these counties look like they're operating in third world countries. That's the problem with all of this. The taint on all of this, the impropriety, the appearance of impropriety, the mendacity, of odor of mendacity hanging over the proceedings. But don't worry, we're going to let the DA who created all this mess make a decision on how she'd like to proceed. You lost, but you get to make the decision. That's what's so absurd here. But again, this is the reason why we fight on so many issues.